Hello, and thank you for joining our teaching for 21st Century webinar brought to you by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang. I'm your host, Anni Cyrus. I know most of you or all of you have registered today because we have a very special guest, Raymond Abraham. However, unfortunately, very shortly before I started the webinar, I was informed that something has came up, and unfortunately, he won't be able to make it tonight, but I did not want to let you guys just wait there for a webinar to start. So with approval from my boss, I decided to join, say hi to everybody, inform you that unfortunately, we won't be having Raymond Abraham with us. However, I know the topic was the Islamic well, what should we call it? Islamic terror, Islamic horror, Islamic, whatever you want to call it, I'll call it that. So I figured I might be able to talk to you a little bit, answer some questions, if any, and, you know, we just carry on for as long as we can. So you, dear audience who have been with us for a while during these webinars, will not be disappointed. So on that note, please, as always, use the Q&A box on your screen if you're joining us via Zoom, or the comment section on Facebook. If you have any questions about Islam, Islamic terror, jihad, Sharia, women under Islam, children under Islam, anything Islam, feel free to throw those questions at me and I will do my very best to answer them. However, please know, since I will be hosting, guesting, and producing, I might look down a lot to read your questions, so do pardon me for that. But since this was a very, very last moment thing, I didn't prepare anything. So I know some of you came to know me when I had the privilege and honor to do the webinars for the David Horowitz Freedom Center. So why don't I start from there, so you might know why I have the credentials to kind of sort of try my best to fill in today for Raymond Abraham. And so I do apologize for that. I have to play the Facebook video in order to see the comments. So you're going to hear an echo back for 1 second and I will cut it. There we go. Okay, so I was born and raised in Islamic Republic of Iran, which many call Iran. And to make a very long 15 years of a story short, I went through a lot of trauma for being born a Muslim in an Islamic country that was ruled by Sharia, including being put in prison for things that later on I learned normal teenagers do, like singing publicly accidentally. I promise that wasn't on purpose, or my hair showing from the back of my hijab, again, accidentally. And then I should probably turn the chat on here so I can also see if you make any comments. I attended a party where boys and girls were all in the same room. You know, they do that here a lot. And for all of that, for those that I did get caught, I faced either jail time, prison time, lashing, or lashes is the proper term to use. And then pretty much by the time I was at the end of my 13, getting literally a few days before getting to my 14, my father, who was a sheikh, which is an Islamic leader, a step higher than an imam leader, decided that I am creating too much trouble for the family. So he went ahead and used his authority given to him by Muhammad and Allah and sold me to a man as a child bride, received what he thought is a proper and fair amount of money, or price, I should say, because he received $50, actual American dollars, and then some opium for his personal usage of about a month, and handed me over. And from there, I officially became a child bride. I know this was a long time ago, but I can promise you, even though it was a long time ago, it does not make it any easier or different, or anyhow. Back to the topic. About a year and a half or so into the marriage, my darling, dear, loving, and wise of a woman grandmother decided this time to save me from the hell I was in. So he hired the smugglers to smuggle me out of the country through border into Turkey. And of course, as I'm sitting here, it was successful. I went through proper channels. I went to United Nations. This is years ago. So this was before United Nations joined the Islamization. This was before United Nations joined the Communist Socialist Party. So back then they really did their job. Lucky me, I went to UN, did the proper things I had to do, got approval from UN, and from there I applied for America. And as I am sitting here in front of you today, or in front of camera, as you see, America accepted my case, and I came to America in 2002, proudly a citizen, American citizen since 2010. Now, with all of that quickly put into one few minutes information, that is why I consider myself an expert on Islam and Sharia, especially when it comes to treatment of women and children under Sharia and under Islam. Now, let me start here. I even though I've been doing this for many years and many other people have been doing it, there's still this little tiny bit of a confusion. We need to draw a line. So there's Islam, and then there is Sharia. I should do it this way. There's Islam, there's Sharia. So they are connected. One cannot, I always say, if you remove one, the other one will fall. They are connected and they support each other, but they are two different things. Islam is different, it's one topic, and then Sharia is combination of other topics that comes together and creates this umbrella, pyramid, whatever you want to call it. Now, Islam by itself can definitely be considered a religion. It could be considered a religion. However, the attachment it has over to Sharia takes away the religion part. So when you are a Muslim, you are following Islam, but you are obeying Sharia. You see the difference there? You're following Islam, but you obey Sharia. Now, what is Sharia? Sharia is a combination of their holy book, Quran, the life of their prophet, which has been mentioned in Quran, is a perfect example of a man, Muhammad. And then there's a collection of the stories told by those who live around Muhammad of his lifetime, known as hadith. You put those three together and you get Sharia. Now, the translation of, I have also heard many people say Sharia law, and I try to correct them. It's not a big deal, but Sharia by itself means collection of Islamic laws. So adding the second law to the word Sharia would be repetitive. So Sharia is collection of Islamic laws. Now, right there is where it goes from the religion part into, you can call it many different things based on your own experience, your own understanding. There are people who call it a political ideology. There are those who call it brainwash ideology. There are people who call it cult. I personally, from the life that I have lived as a Muslim, and then I have lived the life of an ex-Muslim, looking at everything I have been through and everything I have been taught and everything I have taught myself later on, I know who does that. Like, you run away from this horrible thing, and then, but you still continue educating yourself. I think it's the fact that I know it's my enemy, so I really have to know it very well. Do pardon me if you are not used to my programming. I sometimes jump, but I catch myself and come back. Anyhow, I personally call it a war against humanity. Sharia is a war against humanity. If you would live under Sharia, or if you would study Sharia to the fullest extent, where you would have a full understanding of all the ups and downs, you would absolutely come to realize this whole system was put together with this man known as Muhammad, literally based on his hatred for humanity. If we would go very detailed and put like a best of microscope to look, his hatred for women, because majority of the slavery, the inhuman acts, the pressure and oppression is targeted toward women under Sharia. And these were all created by Muhammad. So it goes to my understanding of it is this man had such issues, so much hatred toward women, that he created this entire system that he called it Islam, and then later on turned it into Sharia, because he originally started as, this is a religion, it's called Islam. We have Allah, we have me as the prophet, and here's the perfected version of a holy book named Quran. And then later on, if you study Muhammad's life, you come to realize that he went from being a prophet very quickly. What I mean by quickly, I don't mean time-wise. I mean, overnight, he went from being a prophet to a military leader. He literally started changing everything that was supposed to be Islam. Now, if you look at the original or beginning of what he claimed to be Islam, you can clearly see he just literally stole few information, a few verses from Bible and Torah, and put it together and made it to look like a new thing. Let me just really quickly pay attention to your comments, because I promised I'm going to fill in as much as I can information wise, but I'm going to also answer questions. Americans need to learn to address Iran by their real name, the Islamic Republic of Iran. This may help in trying to learn about Iran. I am so happy you said that. I'm trying to see if I can see Jean Anderson. Jean, brilliant point. I always say I was born and raised in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Why? Iran wasn't always an Islamic country. Well, technically, no land was ever Islamic, but in the modern history, Iran by itself was known as the mini America in the Middle East, because literally, if you look at it, it's simple, you can find it. Just look up Iran before 1979, and you'll be like, whoa, women, man, everybody, everything looked like America. Now, of course, Iran is a lot smaller than America. And even the constitution of Iran under the Shah of Iran, or king of Iran, the last king of Iran, was copied, literally copied from American constitution. The only thing that was missing was the Second Amendment. The rest were there until Khomeini came along. Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, that's sometimes pronounced as Khomeini. He hijacked an ongoing revolution, not even revolution, it was an uprising. He hijacked it. Side note, his promises to hijack, to convince those who were doing the uprising was, if you let me hijack this revolution, if you let me overthrow the kingdom and take power, I will give you free housing, free gas, free food, free education, free medical. Does that sound familiar to anybody? That's why sometimes I sit around and say, I feel like I'm watching history repeat itself in a different location. Anyhow, he hijacked the revolution, turned the country into Islamic country. The whole process from the moment he landed in Iran, invaded Iran, until the country became fully constitutional and law and everything, Sharia obeying, was 90 days, like literally 90 days, boom. So that's why I was born in 1983. This is after the revolution. So it's very important for me, and as Jean mentioned, to say Islamic Republic of Iran, because they turned it Islamic. It wasn't an Islamic country. It wasn't, created or invented by Muhammad or his people. No, it was a very westernized cultural country coming from 2,700 years of history. That boom, they took it. It's been 43 years now, I think, if my math isn't off, about 43 years, and my people haven't been able to take the country back, even though they're extremely fed up. Thanks for the info on Islam and Sharia. It was great to learn this. Oh, you're very welcome. I am trying to see the topics I can talk about that could somewhat be close to what you might have been here to hear about. And I'm going to quickly take a glimpse at our Facebook feed to make sure I'm not missing anyone's questions, just in case if they're coming in. Okay, so we established that if you would look at original what he claimed to be Islam, you would see that it's all just, he stole information, literally just grabbed things from Christianity and Judaism and tried to make it. And of course, when that didn't work out, he decided, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to go and start war. That's where the entire scenario of convert or kill came to picture. Now, I understand those of you who might be familiar with either Sharia or Quran by itself, you might say, well, there is a third option, which is becoming a dhimmi. Now, what is a dhimmi? It's when you don't convert to Islam, you stay whatever you are. However, you become a second-class citizen. You lose certain rights, you lose certain access, and on top of that, you pay a money known as jizya in Arabic. Now, a lot of people have translated the word jizya into Islamic tax. The reality is the meaning behind jizya, it's actually protection money. It doesn't mean Islamic tax. Islamic tax has a different name actually in Arabic. It's not jizya, it's zakat. Zakat is when it's Islamic tax, meaning every Muslim is obligated to pay a percentage of their income towards Islam. They pay it now in Islamic countries, they pay it to the government, and government decide which terrorist organization they want to support. For example, my motherland, which is a big fan of Hamas and Palestinian terror groups. Or if you're an Islamic community, society, but not a country, you give that jizya, that zakat to your imam, your local mosque leader. Jizya means protection money. You pay the Muslim leaders so they don't kill you or your family. Yes, that is an option to become a dhimmi and pay jizya. Now, that is a band-aid. That is a temporary option. Reason for that. When you become a dhimmi, as I said, you lose certain access and rights. You become a second-class citizen. Part of those rights that you lose, number one, you are not eligible to have a job within the government. Absolutely not. Second thing, you do not have the right to own your own business or property. That's another right you lose. For example, Christians, Baha'is, or Jews in Islamic Republic of Iran, they don't own a home. They don't own their businesses. None of them work for any government or federal related organizations or companies. On that note, they will put a cap on your income. There are only certain jobs you can have. You cannot be a teacher, for example. That's a government. It's considered a federal government job. And also they would not want you as a dhimmi to teach their Muslim kids anything outside of Islam. So because there's a cap on your income, let's say, for example, you make 500 a month, about 300 of that 500 percentage-wise is your jizya. You're left with $200 to survive a month. There will be a time when you don't have the money to pay the jizya because you fed yourself or your family or pay your bills. The moment you cannot afford to pay the jizya, we go back to the original plan, convert or die. So jizya is in Sharia, absolutely, but it is very, very, very impossible to survive on being a dhimmi for more than a couple of years. The Islamic government will squeeze you to corner you to convert. That's why after, for example, after the Islamic regime took over my motherland, a lot of non-Muslims pretended to be Muslims. Behind closed doors, they aren't. But in society, in normal situations, they are. Now, recently, about 15 years ago, the Islamic regime added a new field to their paperwork, which was your religion. So you have to put your religion on your paperwork. Either you're applying for a school, applying for university, applying for a job, applying to rent a home, whatever the case might be. If there's application involved, even opening a bank account, you have to put your religion on. Now, some people still put it down as Muslim, but some, I'm not judging here, certain group of people who do not want to even lie or deny their beliefs, they put down their real religion, and that's where their life flips. And that's why if you followed Iran's news or information, you would come to realize that in last 10, 15 years, excuse me, pardon. last 10, 15 years, it's been a lot more, they've been cracking down a lot more non-Muslims in Iran and making their lives living hell. I see I have 3 questions on the Q&A box, so I'm going to open these and read them. This is the part where this happens, so I forgot to prepare my glasses. Here we go. So yes, that is, I think we covered the whole convert and kill thing. I hope we did. So first question I have here, Stephen Mix, did you know any Christians while growing up in Islamic Iran? Yes, I did. I knew Christians, I knew a few Baha'is, and I knew a few Jewish families. The Baha'i classmate I had, I don't know what happened, but she was in school one day and then she wasn't the day after that. No idea what happened. Sadly, one of the Jewish families that were in the neighborhood, their son was killed by son of another neighbor. So here's what happened. I want to say somewhere around right after the Iraq War, when the Iran-Iraq War was finally over, the Sharia court, Supreme Court of Iran, put out this thing that it was actually, the story was there was a young man who was a champion of wrestling in Iran, and somehow somebody sold him out, and the government was informed that he's a Jew. And then as he was walking to get on the, the big circle mattress thing that you used to do wrestling, pardon my lack of English here, they stopped him and they told him that his rights to wrestle has been revoked. And literally the sentence was, because he is filthy, so is his sweat, and if he even step on that mattress or that area, they have to burn it. He was arrested, taken away, later on executed. And on that topic, when there was a little bit of talk going on, it was issued that a fatwa was issued that if you are aware of Jewish people, kill them and the government will reward you. Yes, they would reward those who would kill Jews. And that actually happened in our neighborhood when a Muslim family's son killed the Jewish family's son. They were rewarded, and then the rest of the family actually got arrested. I don't know what happened to them after their arrest, but I know they were, like, I know police came and took them, and the whole neighborhood was so weird. Like, it was such a weird situation. Okay, I'm going to say weird. As a child, it was weird. As an adult, it was disturbing and disgusting. So, okay, I hope that answered your question. And I think I added a little bit of a story there too. There is, okay, so I'm reading a novel about the Iranian Revolution. One character gets upset that Khomeini calls himself Imam because she does not think he is qualified or something. But I thought that term was more commonly applied to many Muslim leaders. Can you explain that? Yes. Mix, I'm going to have to explain this more of a guest. Do tell me if I'm wrong. Khomeini was not an imam. Well, he was an Islamic scholar, but he gave himself the title of Ayatollah. He named himself or retitled himself after he was elected. I say this because it was so amazing. There was no election. He arrived in Iran with a plane, got off the plane, went to the giant, big, famous cemetery in Tehran, gave his speech, and just said, "I am Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini." And that was it. And a few months later, he claimed that, "Oh, no, we did a fair election and 85% of Iranians elected me." I'm like, okay. There was no election. But however, he did title himself Ayatollah. Ayatollah needs qualifications. You have to be qualified to be an Ayatollah. Ayatollah is it. It's literally like after Ayatollah, you're pretty much a prophet. It's like really up there. And he wasn't qualified. To this day, none of them are qualified as far as Iranian leaders go. And there were certain people, including some of the members of his own cabinet, that were like, okay, this is pushing it too much. You're not an Ayatollah. You're too old to go and finish your education to become an Ayatollah. But the same thing applied to Khomeini. When Khomeini died, to this day, there is a video. There is a video where someone in the room of the decision room is filming, and Rafsanjani mentions, Rafsanjani was the president who passed away a few years ago. He mentions that we're going to lose the country. We don't have Ayatollah ready to go. So we're going to promote Khomeini, the current supreme leader, temporarily until we find someone. And that temporarily led to today. He has stayed in power. But the frustration and the problem was not over the word imam. It was over Ayatollah. He literally like promoted himself. It was kind of like, I don't like it when I use these terminologies or examples or comparisons. Wow, comparisons is the right term. But it's kind of like a pastor would just walk in and say, I'm your new pope. I'm like, huh? What made you a pope? That was the dramatic difference from where he was as far as credential goes to where he promoted himself to be an Ayatollah, which is Ayatollah is supreme leader, basically. Now, this isn't the first time, nor was the Khamenei case. For example, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this imam who calls himself the imam of, what is he? Imam of peace? The Iranian imam? That person is not even an imam. He was still going to school, and Ayatollah Talagani, which I should do some more reporting on that guy because everybody needs to know him. I sometimes make a bad joke about Ayatollah Talagani was definitely a student of Hitler. But Talagani decided to give him an honorary promotion to be an imam. This imam of peace who sits there and gets a lot of attention, and a lot of people are actually believing what he has to say, supposedly moderate guy who's trying to make it peaceful. This guy doesn't even have the credential to be an imam. He cannot claim to be an imam. One person, Ayatollah Talagani, by himself felt like, I want to give you an honorary this and that, but he doesn't have the credential. So this happens, especially in Iran. These self-proclaims or somebody else giving the promotion happens a lot when they don't have the credentials, but they claim the position and they just go on with it. I'm going to quickly look into our questions on Facebook. Gina, thank you for repeating your question. You said this yesterday and I forgot to answer. Gina is asking, what does it mean if pork isn't cooked in public schools anymore? In general, pork is definitely a huge no-no, absolutely no-no in Sharia. So this started about 3 years ago, where I believe it was in Michigan, when some of the Muslim parents complained that they need halal meat in the menu because their kids need to eat halal meat. That when that was forced in and they accomplished that request, then they came with the whole, how Merry Christmas was offensive to Muslim kids, so they kind of removed it from schools, and we all just sat there, we're like, oh yeah, sure, we don't want to offend them. Well, I wasn't one of them. I'm sure most of you weren't either. Same thing came with the pork situation, that pork or even bacon for breakfast, it's offensive. So when it is officially from any school, when they remove pork and replace it with halal meat, because that's what's happening in Michigan, just so you know, as of right now, the menu isn't halal for Muslim kids anymore. The entire menu is halal meat. That's it. It's halal meat. Now, two problems. One, why does a kid who's not a Muslim why are they forcing the kids that are non-Muslims to eat halal? Secondly, remember, in order to serve halal, they have to buy the halal from the Islamic halal person, right? What did I say at the beginning about zakat? every Muslim person is obligated to pay Islamic taxes toward Islamic jihad. When an entire school is buying halal food from there, guess where part of the non-Islamic school money is going to? Yes, part of it turns into Islamic tax and goes into the pockets of jihad and Islamic terror. So unknowingly, a lot of Americans with their kids in the schools that are serving halal are supporting jihad. They just don't know it because, of course, they're not going to tell them like, hey, by the way, this halal department and this halal people we're buying the meat from, they're paying zakat. And if they're Shia Muslim, then they're paying another tax called homs. The Shia Muslims have two Islamic taxes versus Sunnis and Wahhabis have only one. Okay, I think I'm getting way too deep into details here. I'm going to pull myself out of that much information. And yes, so basically what it means is they are appeasing their Muslim students' parents, and they're giving into the Islamization, as well as supporting Islamic jihad by paying for halal meat, or by pulling pork from school. They are giving into the Islamic culture. I hope that was a detailed enough answer to your question. I have a question on Zoom from Michael. He went from a false prophet to a warlord. He couldn't win people over with his words and ideas, so he resorted to the sword, extortion, and terrorism. I think you're talking about Muhammad, the prophet of Islam with no prophecy, and you are correct. Yes, he was very frustrated that his words aren't working with people, so he just decided, I'm going to start enforcing convert or kill. And that let me go back to where I always say, a lot of people are like, but there are people who are trying to reform Islam. Like, but you can't reform it. You cannot reform it. Aside the fact that in Quran itself, there's a verse where it says, and when you ask those who are creating corruption, they will say, we are but the reformers. Like, Allah was way ahead of all of this, right? They already had a verse that reformers are actually corrupt. That aside, in order to reform something, you need a solid base. How do you reform an ideology, a cult, a religion, whatever you call it? How do you reform it when the source of it, the prophet of it, is this person that has absolutely zero values? It is, all of his mentality is hate and murder. Like, how do you reform that? You go back 1400 years and say, hey, Muhammad, hold on. Don't marry a 6-year-old. Don't have 11 wives. Don't behead 800 Jews in one night. Do not tell your people to drink camel pee. Like, you see where I'm going with this. There is no, you might as well start a brand new religion of your own. Like, you might have luck finding a better representation for it. There is no reforming 1400 years later when people are still doing exactly what Muhammad did, when the leaders of Islamic countries are if you read the Islamic Republic of Iran's constitution, the penal code and civil code, you read any of it, it's exactly what's in the Quran. I actually have a video, if you like to watch it. This was a few years ago on Glazov Gang YouTube channel. There's a video when I did my series of top 10. And I actually did one of my top 10s on comparing Islamic Republic of Iran's laws versus Quran. And I bring the top 10 exact sentence within the documentation of the government matching the exact verse of the Quran. That's where we're at. We're at a point where 1400 years later, the Islamic countries, the Islamic societies, the Islamic people are still doing exactly what Muhammad did. They're still following the Quran. Now, I agree, there are people who say, well, there is such a thing as moderate Muslims. Is there? Is there? Are you telling me that when in Quran it says, if you do not follow the Quran and Muhammad and you question a single verse of Quran, you shall be killed? Does that leave room for moderate Muslims? No, there are moderate Muslims in Western countries because they can. But if those very so-called moderate Muslims existed in Islamic Republic of Iran, they would not be so moderate. Let me tell you why. I just told you early on a little bit ago, I said we had a neighbor who killed the other neighbor's son who was a Jew, right? Do you think anybody in neighborhood went and did anything about it? No. Were they happy about it? Not all of them. But they couldn't do anything about it because even though in their head they're moderate and they don't believe in the violent part of Quran, if they do anything about it, they're going to end up dead themselves. So the so-called moderate Muslim, the so-called Rashida Tlaibs in America who don't wear the hijab is because they're in America. They're in America. They have a constitution to back them up. If any of, I have said it many times, Linda Sarsour, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, and the rest of them, I will personally get you a one-way ticket to one of the Islamic countries of your choosing. If you make your way back here behaving the same way you are in America, then I'll be more than happy to talk to you about Islam as peaceful, and Muhammad was the first women's rights activist. That's a problem. We're trying to fight it. We're fighting an enemy that is different under our circumstances. That is thanks to our constitution. I hope I'm making sense. I sound like I'm making sense, but the point is, there is one Quran, there is one Muhammad, and both of them, and there's supposedly one Allah, and all of them were very strict on either my way or highway. So it doesn't matter 1400 years later, 400 years later, or 2400,000 years later, this system will stay the same. There is no changing it, because every time you try to change it, I mean, you can look at reformers, they have bounties on their head just like I do. There is no fighting this thing, and that's why I personally call it, it's a war against humanity. That's how it is. Okay, Ben has a question for me. What percentage of women in Iran were married before they were 15, before 1979? How many child brides have been there since? Percentage. Before 1979, I don't have exact stats, but hearing from my grandmother, now remember, my own grandmother was a child bride herself. She was 10 years old when she was married off to my grandfather, who was like 31 or 2 years older than her, or so. No, sorry, 21 or 22 years older than her. Wow, look at me, I corrected 10 years, like that's better. However, as she said, her mom faced a lot of complications, a lot of backlash, and a lot of criticism by even the rest of the family and the neighborhood. So it wasn't something common that is like, it's okay. So I'm not going to go as far as saying none, but it was a very, maybe 1%, maybe. Number of child brides after the revolution, nobody knows the exact number, but in average, even now, which supposedly, even though Islam is Islam, but majority of Iranian people are fed up with it and done with it, and it's more modernized in their mind, and they don't care to follow the rule. It, based on reports, in last 7 years, averaging every year, the child brides that are under the age of 15 are between 25 to 40,000 a year. Beginning of the revolution in the early 80s, actually in 80s, it was really high because of the Iran-Iraq war. It was. I don't know if you're familiar with the war. It was bad. It was 8 years of misery. And Iran, basically, it was that war when Iran was on its own, and then Iraq had the backing of the Western countries. And no, I'm not taking that personal at all. But there was a time when a lot of, I shouldn't use the word father, it's more respected, but a lot of dads, they would give their baby girls, literally baby girls, to marriages as third, fourth, even fifth wife, to just not have to feed them anymore because they couldn't. So yeah, that does not make it any better. Please understand, I'm not saying that as like, oh, they had no choice. No, there's always a choice. There's always a better choice that they made. But in 80s, the number of child brides were skyrocketing in Iran, skyrocketing. It was bad. And also the same thing, as I said, not only the number of child brides, but also the number of, I don't know what you call it. I know what you call it in English. I don't know how to pronounce it, but having more than one wife, that became a lot of these government related family members, they could afford it. So they had 2 wives, 3 wives, 4. A lot of them had temporary wives where you basically, they're basically your, like, it's kind of like, how do I explain it? So their temporary wife, it can be from 1 hour, the marriage can be from 1 hour to forever. You just renew the every year. It's as I said, woman is a property under Sharia, right? So you're like a rental house, rental apartment, a lease of a car. You got a 1 year woman wife, and then after a year you renew the contract again and again. And Linda Sarsour once said, Muhammad, our prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the first women's right activist. That is the right you get as a woman. Okay, I have a question here on Facebook from Carol. When a gal marries a Muslim, does she at some point have to convert? Carol, they don't have to convert at some point. They have to convert before the marriage is done, before they get married. They have to convert first. And remember, converting in Islam, I actually said this once and made a lot of noise. In order to convert to Islam, there's just like 2 lines you say and you convert. So it's it doesn't actually have, it seriously doesn't. Like, you can walk up to a mom or a Muslim and say, hey, I want to be a Muslim. They're like, okay, say, repeat these sentences after me. If you speak Arabic, you say it in Arabic. If you don't speak Arabic, they say it in Arabic and then the translation, and then you repeat it back. Because remember, Allah is non-bilingual. He only speaks Arabic. So you don't, there is no qualification. You don't need to read the Quran. You don't need to be familiar with it. It's you convert first, and then they hit you with reality. Like, oh, you got to wear the hijab now. And then you have to do this, and then do the prayer 5 times a day. And then as a woman, you're pretty much, well, your property now. Let's have fun. But no, before getting married, they have to convert. And if they don't, as Farah Prudence said, if you haven't read Farah Prudence's mom's book, please do purchase it and read it. I will suggest a couple of books today for everyone who's interested. It's called The Frozen Tears. Buy that book. It's her life story, an American Christian woman who married a Middle Eastern Muslim man, and how her life was destroyed until she was able to escape. But even if they don't, there will be a time where the rest of the Muslim community will basically force the Muslim man to force their wife to convert, or they will be exiled. The Muslim man will be exiled, and their marriage will not be considered I'm so glad to hear that, Mindy. Mindy says, everything I learned about Sharia and Islam is from you and the Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam book by Robert Spencer. Mindy, you cannot join the Zoom link at this point. Unfortunately, registration stops right when we start the program, but I am checking my Facebook as often as I can. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. What I want to do is I will keep my eyes on your comments and questions if anything comes in. But since I brought it up, as I said, there are a few books I want to suggest. First thing is, I understand anyone in the right mind would want to reject ever reading the Quran. I completely understand that. However, I want to ask you to do this. Don't read the whole Quran. There is no reason. You don't have to torture yourself or open yourself to evil that much. But if you do me a favor, read chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 9, please. Chapter 4 is fairly long, not that long, not as long as chapter 2, but it's fairly long. But chapter 4, chapter 5, and chapter 9, please read those 3 chapters. If absolutely no reason for you to buy it or anything, there is a website, Quran.com, Quran.com. When you go to their website, on the right hand side, it has a setting option for you to pick which translation you want. They have many translations. You want to pick Sahih International. It's right on the list. I believe the 5th one from top is Sahih International. Click on that so you can read the English translation. Sahih International is by far the least sugar-coated and most accurate translation. Read chapter. You can find every chapter has it like it's the first page has every chapter is available. Start from 4, 5, and 9. Read those 3 chapters. It is crucial for every person, including Muslims, to read chapter 4, 5, and 9 of the Quran. As I said, I normally read the whole thing. I have read it way too many times, but I have to, and I must, and I will continue. This book needs to be read by everyone, every person, as I said, including Muslims, because one thing I always say is that majority of Muslims never actually read the Quran. As I said, it's not a requirement. You don't have to read the Quran. So they don't read the Quran. They know the verses that is for the prayer. And they hear whatever their imam tells them or their parents tells them. But if Muslims would read the Quran, especially Muslims in Western country who still have the way out to become an ex-Muslim, it's not as easy, but it's less deadly than Islamic countries. They will leave Islam. I guarantee you. There is no one, unless you are sick, and I mean sick up here, twisted and just a evil person. There is no way you will read the Quran and not say, okay, I really don't want to have anything to do with this thing. I don't. I'm out. And of course, on top of that, if anybody would take the time to read the Sirah, the story, the biography of Muhammad, or the Hadith, you'd be like, okay, I'm really done with this. So if you want to, please do read the whole Quran. If not, I completely understand. Don't read the Quran, just read chapter 4, 5, and 9. Very important. And then, as I said, there are few books out there that are real story of women who have suffered on their Sharia, both on born Muslims to those who married Muslim men and those who converted. So on top of my head, as I said, I can think of The Frozen Tears, absolutely must read by any non-Muslim Western woman. If for a split second you even have the thought, the farthest, like just the ring of a thought in your head of becoming a Muslim or marrying a Muslim man, read this book before you do that. Please read the book, then decide. And then there is one book by Nani Darwish. absolutely amazingly brave woman. She's from Egypt. Now they call me infidel. Read that book if you can, please. Of course, on a smaller scale of if you want booklets that are not, heavy reading, always feel free to check out politicalislam.com, Dr. Bill Warner. He has many booklets that are easy to read fast and gives you a lot of information. Like, honestly, I didn't know if I was informative. I hope I was. If I was, I think I was. If this was informative for you, booklets by Dr. Bill Warner would be literally take you an hour to read it, and you would get this much information as you did today. And you don't have to even struggle with understanding the accent. That was a joke. I know you guys understand most of me. Michael Rose has a question for me. How common is polygamy of Muslims in America, one wife and 3 dependents according to the census? I don't know the exact number, Michael. And look at me, I actually pronounced that word fairly okay. I don't know the exact number. I don't. And nobody does, because there's no way our government would report, nor is it any possible way they would report to our government, but I would say, with the entire situation of the Afghan refugees coming in, we're definitely about to look at those numbers going up dramatically, because as it is already, a lot of them have shown that they have more than one wife. Some of the child bride cases that was reported claimed that they already had a wife. They got this child bride at 2nd or 3rd to just rescue them and free them. But somehow, I don't know why they're still having them in their house, in their room as child brides. So I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know the real number, but I do know that they are about to go up. And I have a feeling Biden administration is just going to look away, whistle, and have some ice cream while these numbers are going to go up. And while our tax money is going to go to support them and enable them. Jean says, thank you so very much for filling in, very informative, and thank you for doing this. My pleasure. Again, I could not think of just not showing up or showing up and saying, sorry guys, we're not doing. I'm sure I could never ever do as a brilliant job that Raymond Ibrahim would have, but it is absolutely my pleasure. So yes, get those books, read them. We have been fighting an information war since 2001, from the moment President Bush ran behind the microphone to said, I want to assure you this had nothing to do with Islam, and Islam is a religion of peace. From that moment on, we have been fighting an information war. However, we are not winning. Reason is we have been too nice and too kind for too far. Considering this is a David Horowitz Freedom Center webinar, I want to be very clear. In no shape or form am I promoting or suggesting anything that is outside of law, anything that would harm anyone. That is not what I mean by stop being nice and kind. What I specifically mean is grab the books that are provided by experts. As I said, Raymond Ibrahim himself, Dr. Bill Warner, Robert Spencer, David Horowitz himself, Jamie Glazov, Nani Darwish, Bridget Gabriel. There are more than enough books out there, and there are more than enough experts out there who are coming on and telling everybody what is happening. I need you to dedicate a time of your day. I know this is crazy, but you know how we all have a routine. Like we wake up, we do this, and then we do that, we do that, we do that. I need you to please put 15 minutes a day, nothing more than that. Oh, wow, I sound like one of those commercials, like 15 minutes a day, you lose 30 pounds a month. 15 minutes a day, and you might be able to win your freedom back. How's that? But no, I can't be serious for too long. Apparently, it's not my strength. 15 minutes a day. Take 15 minutes a day to study the enemy. Before you know it, you will feel so much better. I sometimes get this question of, Annie, how can you be hopeful and positive and keep fighting? Well, number one, because I get my strength from our Lord and Savior. Number two, I am so well informed that their lies don't shake me. When they come up with all sort of excuses and cover up, it won't fool me. You're not fooled by your enemy. You got nothing to worry about, because for every single action by them, you already have a reaction ready to go. Now, imagine if all of us had that reaction ready. We would definitely do much better. We would definitely stand stronger, and we would definitely sound louder. And that is what we need today. Today, as of this very moment, we still do have our Constitution. Thank the Lord, we still have our freedoms. So it is time to kind of sort of dedicate that time, whatever time you can, every day, get educated, get involved in any shape or form you can. Trust me, we all play a role. Some of us can volunteer our time. Some of us can share the information. Some of us can put together seminars and webinars and speaking engagement. And some of us can do donations. There is so much we all can do. So let's get involved. Let's get behind everybody who is doing what needs to be done. And on that note, of course, I will always say, get behind the David Rose Freedom Center and the Glazov Gang. It has absolutely been my privilege and honor to be working with both the Glazov Gang, Jamie Glazov, and the David Rose Freedom Center front page. Since 2011, actually comes December 1st, we are celebrating our 10th year anniversary. I will post about that later, but right now I want you to please get behind them. Go to frontpagemag.com, make a donation. It is 100% tax deductible. We need your donations so we can keep doing what we're doing. And then after that, go and read all the recent articles, share them with your friend, put them out there, alert your neighbors and your family and your friends that this is getting serious and we need to fight for what we have and we need to do the right thing. Oh, thank you, Michael Rose. You are very, very kind. I am very happy to hear that you guys were not disappointed, at least today. And we will be back next Wednesday with a new guest, and as soon as Raymond Abraham is available to come join us, I promise you we will get him on. Just hang in there until he can join us. Thank you so much for staying with me for 1 hour. Thank you for sending in your wonderful questions and your kind words. End of the day, as Robert Spencer always says, it is not over until it's over, and today it's not over. So stay safe, stay vigilant, and goodbye.